Alright guys, welcome back to my 1972 Corvette Pro Touring project, utilizing the chassis off of a C5 Z06 Corvette. And at this point I'm saying to myself, what have I gotten myself into? There are so many issues in putting this C3 body on the C5 or C6 frame that, well, I can't even go into the number of issues involved. But let me show you a couple of things I am encountering, and we'll try to figure out a way to fix it. Alright, well, here is the bell housing and transmission from the Z06. And you can see this is the torque tube. The drive shaft runs inside here normally. And this is the shifter column on top. Right now that shifter is up here, kind of far forward, but that's not a big deal. You know, that's easy to fix. Okay, but this bell housing is just sticking so far into the passenger compartment that I'm a little concerned about fitting seats in here at this point. I still need to lower this car 4 more inches to get the right height that I want. So yeah, that's a pretty extreme intrusion. So that's a big issue. Alright, up front I have the Z06 engine, 405 horsepower, 5.7 cathedral port heads, with stainless headers, so maybe more than 405 horsepower. And you can see how much room I have back here. This is not good for weight distribution. You know, I want this thing to be an autocross track monster. So we've got to push this thing further back, which means shortening the torque tube some more. We've already cut, what was it, 5 inches out of it? Go back to my old videos and look it up. I can't remember, but it's about 5 inches. And oh, it was 4.5. Excuse me. It was 4.5 inches. We cut out 4.5 inches. And so I want to pull this thing back, you know, another, gosh, 8 inches at least. That's a ton of room we can make room for back here. I don't think it's going to hit. I can relocate this crap on the side here. That's not an issue. There goes one of my boots. You know, this stuff can be moved around. So yeah, this engine can go way, way far back. The question is the engine mounts down here. Are we going to be able to push this thing, you know, 8 inches back or so? I don't know. That'll give me plenty of clearance though with my headers, because right now we're awfully close to these suspension pickup points. So that'll be kind of nice to get it farther back. And I'll have all kinds of room up from front for radiators and intercoolers, maybe, down the road. So I'm not sure how we're going to do that. So that's an issue. Alright, and this is the back side of the Corvette. Okay, this is the C5 frame right here, and I am resting on the cargo compartment, storage compartment of the 72 fiberglass body. So I am, like I said, I am way too high right here. My ride height is too high. This body needs to come down another 4 inches, which means cutting out most of that little drop you see right there. Let me see if I can show that here. Okay, there we go. So here's the body comes across, and then it drops down 4 or 5 inches and then back across. So I will be removing most of this drop in order to get this body down to where it needs to be. So this part here is going to go straight across. So that's going to be an issue. In order to get that transmission out of the passenger compartment, this transmission needs to come back. Gosh, I would like to see, you know, 6 inches or so, but that's not going to happen. Okay, I did a little trigonometry. I know, yeah, I'm impressed. And the half shafts normally go across here, and you don't want them set at 0 degree angle because that tends to burn them up because they don't lubricate themselves properly. A good operating angle, well, I can't say good, but A good operating angle is maybe 10 degrees. An acceptable operating angle is around 20. So if I pull this transmission 4 inches back and I have a 4-inch rise or drop to my suspension, doing the trigonometry there, I come up with about a 20 to 21 degree angle, which is acceptable. Which means, yeah, I can come back 4 inches with this guy if I can figure out the mounting situation. Okay, so here's the plan. We're going to pick this body back off of the chassis. We're going to wheel the chassis out of the garage. We'll bring out the engine hoist and move some stuff around, look at our suspension pickup points. I need to chop the tunnel a little bit more inside, the transmission tunnel, and I need to chop that back box before we drop this thing back down onto the chassis. But see, that chassis is going to require a little bit of reworking, so that should be the first thing we do. So let's get it going. Okay, well, a couple options on this transmission mount. This is the bracket that secures to the transmission. I can cut this thing here and re-weld it so I can move the mount over about an inch. Yeah, pretty darn close to an inch. Then on the bottom one, I can re-drill the holes down there and move that over an inch. But that only gives me 2 inches. That's the easy way to do it. The harder way is going to go for the 4 inches. And I think I can do it just by welding a piece of plate aluminum on the back side of this mount and then running a couple of gussets and using that for my rear transmission mount. That'll give me 4 inches easy. Why not do that? Well, there is one more issue. And it's these control links on the back of the suspension here. The control links control your toe-in for your rear tires. And it helps to control it as the tires go up and down. There's a special geometry it needs to maintain so that you don't get bump steer from the back end. That was one of the big issues with the old Corvettes, the C3 Corvettes, is bump steer from the back end. So if I pull this back 4 inches, the CV joints are likely going to hit where those links tie into the suspension cradle. Let me show you. Okay, so like I said, I could put a plate back here and then gusset it down the side to hold the transmission. I can also move that plate up and down so this transmission would sit as low as possible. That might be a good thing. Okay. But as I move this transmission backwards, the CV joints that sit here are going to run into this mount. Now GM gave me this nice little hole over here on the side. So I could take some 1/4 inch plate aluminum and cut it to fit and then weld that aluminum and drill it and then run the links in there. But that'll probably mess up my geometry, my suspension geometry a little bit. Well, that's a tough call. I'm not sure what I'm going to do right now. Alright, well let's just forget about the back end for now. Let's pull the engine up out of this front suspension cradle and refresh ourselves on how those motor mounts look. Alright, we're swinging. Where does this bolt go? Right. Okay, so this is the front motor mount setup I've got in here. Okay. As you can see, my motor mount is right against this AC compressor. Now I was thinking about making some plates and sliding the whole engine backwards, but that's going to pull the AC compressor with it, and there's just no room for that to happen. Yeah, I don't see how that's going to work. So this bracket and the AC compressor cannot move. So we have my custom motor mount down here. If you're not familiar with that one, go back a few videos and you'll see me making this thing from scratch. It's a cool video. And measuring here, I've got just a tad over 2 1/4 inches from here to here. So it looks like I can just re-drill the 2 holes for that motor mount from the bottom and pull the engine back 2 inches that way. So that will help in getting this engine closer to the firewall and balancing things out. I'm looking here and I just do not see a better way to do it. A better way using the suspension cradle here. Now if I have a custom frame done and I do custom lower here and that upper together, then yeah, I guess I can get that done. But if I want to use this lower engine cradle, that is gonna be it. Alright, so I thought it over a bit and this is gonna be the plan. We're gonna go ahead and push this transmission back 4 inches in order to get this belly housing a bit more out of the passenger compartment. I picked up some aluminum from Ike, the badass welder that I use to weld these chassis cradles together. I got some 1/2 inch aluminum stock and we're going to cut and weld some brackets for this one. The back will be easy. If I bring this back 4 inches, I gotta bring the engine back 4 inches also in order to keep the same wheelbase. But as I showed before, I think I can do 8 inches with this engine. So I may go ahead and cut the torque to another 4 to make up the difference. So let's get to it. Okay, well, this moving the transmission back a few inches is a little tougher than I thought it was going to be because I shortened the cradle so much. The bolts on this side cover here are hitting the aluminum, so I have to clearance the aluminum to make room for those bolts. What a pain in the butt. I think I've got everything clearance, so I'm going to drop it down again. Let's see how this looks. It's got to come over. Right there. I should have about 2 inches. Well, first of all, let's make sure this thing is centered. About 8 3/8 inches there. 8, that's pretty darn good. 8 3/8. Okay, so the transmission is centered. based on this middle rib here. And let's see here. Let's measure the distance of these studs. Like 1 3/4 from this the back of the cradle. Looks like we're in a pretty good spot here on the side. So that's 1 3/4. I'm gonna have about 3 3/4 of setback. So that's not too shabby. I don't think a 1/4 inch would make a big difference. So now I gotta cut out a plate and weld it in. Alright, so this is another issue I am going to have when moving the transmission back 4 inches. This is the transmission in its regular spot. This is the inner hub, I guess you call it, of the CV joint. You can see how huge it is. If I were to push that back 4 inches, it's going to interfere with this toe link. So I'm going to have to relocate this all the way over here and then cut this old brakes right here. I've already got some 1/4 inch plate aluminum that I'm going to weld in there. It's going to take more time. Lots of work, lots of little things to Alright, here you can see the back of the transmission in its normal resting spot here. And you can see these cooling fins down here. They're on the other side of this bracket that I've already cut down. But you can see though, when I move this back 4 inches, it's going to jump over that bracket, and those cooling fins are going to be resting right here on top of this metal here. So I may have to increase the height of the transmission at 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch to make sure that doesn't rub. Or I can take a little bit off of those cooling fins, or maybe a little bit of both. We'll see. Okay, now we're going to take this stuff apart. Alright, let's see how this thing fits. Oh, not too shabby. Got a little bit wide right there, but if I trim this edge here and trim that edge there, that should drop down pretty well and give me a nice even space around, to which I can weld this in. Well, I cut a bracket out for that rear transmission mount. It is going to mount 20 millimeters from this edge here, so it'll be in line with the original transmission mount here. And I am just sanding on it now to get off all the aluminum oxide layers so I can get a good weld. I'm also probably going to bring out my disc sander and put a nice chamfer in here as well so I can get that weld up more tight. Or else I'm not going to get very good penetration. Alright, so if you guys haven't seen the Zombie Suburban before, I am daily driving this thing, so go to my playlist, look at the Zombie Suburban stuff if you're into old school 4-wheel drives, and yeah, give me some thumbs up. We got the suspension cradle loaded up in the Zombie Suburban. gonna give Ike all of these brackets. We'll let him do his thing. Alright, so this is the front suspension, and you saw earlier that I need to move that engine back about 8 inches. So I'm looking at these motor mounts and trying to figure out how this is gonna happen. I was originally looking at possibly welding in some aluminum plate down here, like a 3/8 or 1/4 inch plate, and gusseting it. Maybe run it all the way across, because I'll have more room with that engine set back 8 inches. But 8 inches, geez, that's gonna put this stud for the motor mount way out here. And that's a lot of force being put on a bracket sticking that far out. So I decided that wasn't the best idea. So this is what I came up with. Alright, I got some 2x4 steel tubing. I think it's 120 wall. And we are going to weld this to the side here. I'm thinking about cutting off this bracket here and then tying in this suspension mount to this heavy duty steel. That would be actually a pretty sweet way to go. I don't know if you guys can see it right here. I have a little line marked. That's the 8-inch mark. Not from here, but from the original position of the motor mount. You saw that I had the motor mount re-drilled. And see, I re-drilled the hole here, kind of pushed it in and over a little bit. So if I use that original motor mount, which is that little black dot right there, and move it back here, that's 8 inches right there. So that will actually give me a little bit of wiggle room too, in case I need to come forward a 1/2 inch or something like that. That'll be easy to weld up the 2x4 tubing and move the hole over just a little bit. So I'm kind of liking that idea. Cutting this off, running a 45 down, then a straight piece, then another 45 over here. Now, on this Corvette oil pan, oh, it's probably down here. Okay. The drain plug actually fits forward on this Corvette oil pan. So I can't just run the 2x4 up against it. I'm gonna have to notch it a little bit. So I'll have to get some heavy duty steel or something like that and put a little notch in there. I don't know if I want to do a circle or maybe a couple of 45s. I don't know. I'll figure out something. But it has to be notched for clearance. Not a huge deal though. It's in the middle. Yeah, looks like it's pretty much right in the middle. So that'll be easy to figure out. I like symmetry. Alright, that looks good right there. So I've got a little bit of overlap here, but I'm going to go ahead and tack it in. And I'm almost trying to cut it and then just kind of bend over the edge so that it fits nice and flush. That's looking pretty good. I'm not fully welding it right now. I'm just doing some really strong, solid beads just to make sure it can hold the weight of the engine. That one was left-handed. Alright guys, well once again, I'm running out of time. This video is getting too long and this garage is a mess. So I'm going to spend a day or so kind of cleaning it up. The rear suspension cradle is still at Ike's place being welded. Hopefully I'll get that today or tomorrow. We need to slide this chassis underneath the C3 and see how that engine lines up in the engine compartment, see if I like it. If it's too far back, I may have to push it forward an inch or so. We'll see. Once we get the cradle back from Ike, then we can test the rear suspension. Once we cut the tub, I still need to do that. Well, that's messy. I hate that fiberglass work. And once we get that finalized, then we'll start, well, then I'll be able to actually cut my torque tube again. The torque tube is only too long. So I'll have to cut the torque tube a second time. And maybe even get that to Ike to re-weld. I thought my tacks were pretty good on that torque tube, but we'll see. So anyway, if you like my videos, I'm trying to crank them out more and more. I've got some extra time on my hands these days. And but I don't do Facebook, I don't do Twitter, I don't do social media, that kind of stuff. So, you know, if you like my videos, give me a thumbs up. That boosts me in the ratings. Talk about me on social media, good or bad. You know, and you know, see if we can get my viewership up. I want to hit that 1,000 viewer mark before the end of the year. So come on, let's put a little push out there and see what we can do. And have a very Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad, and catch you again soon.